It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality. I am Megan Bonner, and joining me today, as always, is my lovely co-host, Christy Powell.
Howdy.
And joining us again today is recurring guest, Serafina Smith.
Hi, everybody.
Back by popular demand.
Overwhelming.
Well, thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Oh, and our live studio audience, thank you guys for showing up
Hey, everybody.
on
You
a
guys are great.
Thursday night. So today we will be talking about a few different news items and topics. But before we get into those wonderful tidbits, we have Community Corkboard.
We need a theme song for that.
I know, right? So Community Corkboard this week will be our Shelley Siegel concert, which will follow the live streaming of Secular Sexuality.
Woo!
And we will all three be there. So, you know, it'll be the best.
Yeah, come out and join us. Let us see you face to face.
It would be great to see some of our fans and just anybody who wants to show up, really.
All those sexy people. Bring your lover, bring your brother, bring your cousin, bring whoever. Even if they hate the show, maybe especially if they hate the show.
That would be even better, yeah.
They're the folks that need it.
Hey, yeah,
Got some learnings to do.
We will be taking live questions from the audience. So if you have a real dinger, then go ahead and bring it.
Yeah, have a drink or two first, and then we will be serving food and drinks at the venue.
Yes, there will be drinks available for purchase, and food is on us.
Yeah, so bring your Valentine a little buzzed, and with that question in the back of their pocket that they're like, no, I couldn't possibly.
Or
I wouldn't
bring them
dare
not
ask.
buzzed and get them buzzed.
Yeah. Those are the questions that we want. The one that you would only ask after, like, halfway through that second drink.
Yes,
Yeah.
for
Those
are
sure.
gonna be the good
or
ones.
fourth. So, with that, Mark, roll the thing.
Make this Valentine's Day one to remember. It's time to get sexy. Live in Austin, Texas, an intimate performance by recording artist Shelley Siegel follows a live taping of Secular Sexuality. Food is included and drinks will be available for purchase. Get your tickets now by going to eventbrite.com and search for Secular Sexuality. That's eventbrite.com, search Secular Sexuality.
To be safe.
Oh, sorry. We were just talking about our mutual crushes for Shelley Siegel.
Yeah.
So, with that, shall we get into our news stories? Or, oh wait, no, Mark reminded me. Thank you, Mark. We do also have a January newsletter, which has been released. It is available in print and also in digital copy. You should have got a copy in your email. If you did not, please sign up now.
It's a good time.
It is. I mean, it's always a good time.
Yeah.
When is it not a good time around here?
It's fair to say. Fair to say.
24/7.
Yeah, I mean, we're keeping it bumping pretty.
Keeping it live.
Yeah, and fun. And open 7 days a week. ACA, not me. So,
It's not what I've been told. Just heard.
okay, that's true.
Yeah.
So, Christy, with that, would you like to take us into our first story?
Speaking of things always being a good time,
yeah.
it was impossible to talk about the news this week without highlighting the Supreme Court's decision to overturn the injunction against the Trump-era trans military ban. So, yeah, it's an important thing to be aware of. Basically, the ban, which is still sort of working its way through the courts, had been stopped by a couple of different state Supreme Courts and the different district courts. And so they had been an injunction. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision that reflects the new conservative makeup of the court, that's likely to hang around for some time. And an important thing to be looking at as we're voting and considering these issues, that very same Supreme Court has overturned this injunction, basically suggesting that the lower court's ideas that there was no real financial reason, that there was no safety merit, that there was no good reason for this ban other than animus, the Supreme Court's saying, well, hold on, there may be a good reason for it. So the question is, what good reason is there for banning trans folks from the military? There's no real evidence that it's creating any undue financial burden on the military, on their healthcare costs, on their training costs, things like that. Another common concern is that it might affect unit cohesion, people getting along in the workplace, as well as the idea that it may be hurting morale overall to have trans folks existing among, cis folks. And all the commanders and the leaders of all 4 branches have come out and spoken before Congress and said that there's no problem here. There's no reason to prevent trans folks from being part of. Yeah. So, there's no data at the moment suggesting that there's any additional burden. So this seems to be a solution without a problem. But I think we kind of understand that the problem is some level
less
of hatred,
with
bigotry.
The actual soldiers.
Yeah, it's not even misunderstanding so much as it is just anger and irrational outrage. I mean, is there something I'm missing? Is there some good reason that we haven't covered yet?
I personally can't think of one because, honestly, whether male, female, sex, gender, whatever, if you can do your fucking job, you can do your fucking job.
Right. And, I mean, that was, Newt Gingrich and trying to keep women out of the military in general and out of combat positions,
And there are some really butch women.
What if there's a woman lying in a ditch somewhere and, she's got a vagina and women in a ditch.
Boobs, and
boobs, and then the war will just be over. Yeah, I mean, all of those
Worst case scenario, you're going to die, last act sex.
Yeah, I mean, it's an encouraged option.
I'm sorry, was that a bad idea or?
It's up to you.
It's how I hope to go out. That's fair. That's fair to say. But yeah, if you wanted to present this idea that it was significantly increasing health costs to have women in the military, or here now, 20 years after that, we're talking about whether it would increase healthcare costs to have trans folks in the military, then that's a conversation that we should be looking at policies. Should the government be paying for this or that or the other? Right. But first of all, that's really an excuse because there's no research, there's no data, there's no thoughtful understanding that that's even the case.
That's not even the question right now.
Even though it's being sort of presented as this straw man argument, it's been overwhelmingly pointed out that that's not happening. So what is happening? What is the problem that this solution is trying to solve?
Bigotry and assholes.
Yeah, I mean that's what it feels like. I mean, I would love to hear anybody from the audience who can have even like a different point of view, a different perspective on why this is happening, because it's really difficult for me to imagine that there are any legitimate arguments, let alone ones that hold any water.
I mean, I know I can say for me personally, of course, not being in the military. If I am in a situation, if you've got the training and you have the knowledge, fucking have my six, whatever.
Yeah, you want the best person for the job.
Yeah, it's not going to matter whether that's a he or a she. It doesn't matter to me, or what they were identified as birth or how they identify now. It doesn't fucking matter.
And I've perhaps unsurprisingly heard a lot of arguments about this. And the basic layout of it is that, generally speaking, being in the military and having to take some sort of medication regularly is a no-no.
That's so, an extra burden if you're
Yeah.
out in the field or something.
But there are exceptions made to that. And one of those exceptions made, specifically the Obama administration directed this to be made, was for transgender individuals who needed to have like hormones and such to be okay to continue in the military. And then they're far from the only exception. Can't talk today. They're far from the only exception. But, some people thinking, whoa, that's obviously not a good thing because who knows what could happen. It's more price or they could, I don't know, freak out in the
If you're going to have
In the field, I
PTSD
don't know.
about something, I don't know if it would be that.
Yeah, it's a bit silly. And there have been studies done that have pretty much concluded across the board that it's not a burden on the military to have transgender people serving. So, I mean, from my perspective,
Data.
It's just our president playing to his
Base.
evangelical base. But
Yeah. And all of those people who are scared by things that they don't understand or that their God tells them is wrong. Yeah. So with that, we do need callers. Hello, everybody. 512-686-0279. Please call. Today is kind of a grab bag, so you can ask any question in the ether that you've got. You got the three of us. I think between the three of us, we can probably come up with some sort of advice or suggestions.
Bring it on.
any
Bring
question,
it
no matter
Anything.
how personal.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily going to answer it, but
I mean,
bring it on.
but you can ask it for sure.
Watch me tap dance.
With that, we actually do have one caller. Would you guys like to take this caller?
Absolutely.
No,
No?
I'm just kidding.
Okay. So this is this Celis or Celis?
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Yes, hi?
Is this Celis?
Yes, it is. It's
Oh.
actually Felix.
Celis, I said it right the first time. Okay. What would you like to
yeah,
talk to us about today?
Just wanted to say, trainings are gross. Ew.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Well,
Have a great day.
have fun with that. We obviously disagree on a few points.
I mean, when I haven't showered in a week or two, I'm pretty gross.
I mean, we all are, really, if we haven't showered in a week.
It feels like the same level of debate that we're discussing in, the Supreme Court right now. Like, gross, not, hey, we have this detailed research study that indicates fucking shit.
I mean, there's a reason we have
That's what we're
deodorant and
reasoning
perfume.
with. Uh-huh.
And it's not because we all want to smell like lilacs. So, with that,
Yeah, so...
why don't we just move right along
Yes.
over?
Yeah, in case there are any questions about trans folks being discriminated against and how that starts at the top and trickles down to the
Moves
base.
its way down.
Yeah. Speaking of.
Yeah, speaking of,
Yeah.
Sarah, did you have a story for us out of Japan?
Indeed, yes. It's rather similar to the previous story, in fact, in that it is about a Supreme Court decision that affects transgender individuals. It was revealed today that the Supreme Court of Japan has turned down a man's request to update their laws regarding transgender individuals. Specifically, he wanted to be able to change his documentation, but also it involves being able to obtain gender surgeries that are covered by, medical coverage in Japan.
So basically anything that requires you to sign a form.
Yeah, pretty much.
effectively. Like other than, buying clothes, your pronouns, the way you present yourself, we're talking about anything that has any sort of formal aspect to it is being restricted?
Yes. This fellow, Takakito Usui, wanted to change
Very
the
nice.
laws.
Very nice.
I study Japanese.
It shows.
Which are rather stringent. In order to have any of these things happen, you need to show proof that you are single, that you have no children under the age of 20, and and you must be physically sterile. So it basically amounts to
What?
if you want to transition, get sterilized first.
Yeah, but that wasn't the only thing, though. I mean, you have to be single
Yeah.
and sterile. Okay, well,
Yes, they said it was to prevent problems in parent-child relations that could lead to societal confusion and abrupt changes in society.
I mean,
Basically, Japan's society has been sexually and gender-related repressed pretty much since we went in and messed
I was
with
about to
them.
say, since America
For a
started
while.
It's our
getting
bad.
involved.
It's our bad.
the way that Christians do. So,
Cheers.
with that, I honestly don't know where to go because it's so ridiculous.
It again brings up the question of why, because so often there are all these straw arguments about how, it's to protect the children, but
Oh, bullshit.
the research doesn't bear any of this shit out. And
Yeah.
it's very frustrating to see not just bad policy enacted or policy you disagree with, but policy that is not tied to information in any kind of way.
Yeah.
Because how do you argue with somebody who just says gross, throws their hands up and hangs up? Like,
Yeah.
come on.
Well, as we've seen, you don't really get to argue with them. They just
Yeah.
hang up.
Apparently, they have no comeback. They will not stand on the line and try to hold up their argument. They will run away with their tail between their legs and bitch and moan to their friends.
That sounds like a challenge.
Oh, but it is. I mean, you think we three can't take somebody on? Oh, please. Bring it. So, with that,
Moving on.
yes, moving on. We actually have another caller on the line, and one would hope that this one will not be as much of an ass as the previous.
And we do still have plenty of lines open. Just give us a call.
We
We
love you
do.
guys.
With that, let's go to Mark in Oregon. Mark, you are on the air.
Hello.
Hello, hello. What would you
My
like to
last
talk about
name
tonight?
is-
I'm sorry?
My last name is Strait.
Mm-hmm.
Strait. It's not a joke.
Like George.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but I just became a Patreon subscriber, and
Thank you.
yeah, one of the did I just put you on speakerphone?
Oh, if you did, it's okay.
Yeah, you're good. What's on your mind?
Okay, so can you still hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, so one of the reasons I did subscribe was because I watched your show, 2 shows, last night, first time, right? And one was about sexual addiction, or a part about sexual addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I thought, wow, these guys would be interested to talk to some of them about some of my things.
Mm-hmm.
Then with that, let me take you off speaker because I can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, sex addiction is obviously a big question in the field right now, and a lot of opinions about it. I definitely feel pretty strongly about mine, but I'm curious where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Well, I was kind of over-sexualized from the time I was about 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have any, I was always sexual with any kid around the neighborhood, a boy or a girl, all kinds of stuff. But I also was, born into Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, that for me was like, I had this weird dichotomy going on,
Mm-hmm.
super Christian and also really over-sexualized.
Right.
That really screwed with my head.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine.
Yeah.
So, I kept that up, all throughout my youthfulness and into my teen years, the perfect Christian, super Christian, youth leader, all that kind of stuff, all the way through having sex all the time, at the park, it didn't matter where it was.
The park is a fun place.
Well, it is. I even worked at one point and at the park that I had sex in, which was an amazingly easy way to do it.
I
But
bet.
Yeah, that does facilitate a little bit.
It does sound convenient.
yeah, the amazing thing was I got a full scholarship to a college called Biola. I don't know if you know what that college is. It's a Christian college on the West Coast.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so my first semester there, of course, I was put in. They segregated the boys and the girls quite effectively back in the day. This was in the 70s, of course. And I was in a freshman dorm, and it was heaven for me.
Yeah, that's always the start of a good story.
Oh, man, because there were so many freshman boys that were pent up, and I wasn't so much, but they seemed to be. And until, of course, I met them, and they became less pent up about it. So about my second semester in college, I made the mistake of actually saying to somebody that I was gay. And that was the problem. So I was called into the dean of men's office and was kicked out, of course, because I was gay. But anyway, so I'm just wondering, I have no memory of any sort of sexual abuse of myself. Looking back now as a 5-year-old, having sex with other 5-year-olds is a little bit abusive on my part, I think, because these kids had no clue what was going on. And it didn't even enter my mind that there was anything. It was just like, I was just playing. So that, to me, now looking back, was like, oh, this is really screwed. I mean, that was not so good for these other kids.
Yeah, I mean, sexual contact at a young age looks a lot of different ways and has a lot of different things attached to it. It's hard to know.
It depends on the person.
Yeah, and it's hard to know kind of exactly what you're referring to, but, definitely when we look at these sorts of things, I don't think we're looking at a addictive or a personality that's over-sexualized or these different things. I think it is really healthier and easier to look at it from a lens of, appropriate boundaries and sensuality and good education about consent and communication and all of these sorts of things. But was there a particular question or issue that you feel like you're up against?
I was wondering, like, is that, it seemed like when I look back on it now, and that just kept on in my life. When I got kicked out, I was only 17 when I started college. So, I was just 18 when I was kicked out of the school. And then I was, my parents, my father was a Marine drilling instructor, so I was kicked out of the house. And I became a rent boy, basically, is what they're called now. And traveling around and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I was just wondering, I just think that when I talk to other people, they don't have these kinds of, I have never come across anybody that seems to have had such a prolonged sexual, I'm 59 now and in very bad physical shape. I'm terminally ill, but so I don't have sex very often now. But it just seems like there are very few people that have my experience. Is it really uncommon, or am I, it just seems like odd to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the old anecdote is, how do you define a sex addict or what makes somebody a sex addict? And the joke is always that it's just anybody who has more sex than their therapist, right? So when we look at, libido and, whether that was appropriate or problematic or if there's something wrong with you or these different things, there may be, we haven't discussed sort of the details and numbers and all of those things and the problems that it might have caused and stuff like that. But yeah, there may have been some real problems in your life. And it sounds like it may have caused some issues. Now, I want to be very clear that it sounds like from the story that you've described that having too much sex wasn't the problem. It was the type of sex that you were having. And that's a very different issue. And it wasn't even the type of sex you were having. It was the assholes and idiots around you and how they perceived that sex. And so the problem is more an issue of, societal oppression and just outright idiocy and bigotry. But, if you're asking about what a healthy, normal, quote-unquote, libido looks like, there is really not a good number, not a good measuring stick for that.
And Christy and I were actually talking about this before the show today, about, just like with anything else, libido is on a spectrum. You can have everything from asexual all the way to people who think, who consider themselves to have a sex addiction. And so all along that spectrum you can fall, and just because you are having more sex than your therapist or want to have more sex than your therapist does not necessarily mean that there's something wrong with you. That's just where you are on the spectrum. Now, were you concerned about the age at which you became sexually aware?
Well, not really. I mean, my first memory was probably 5 years old, and I had a deputy dog, which was a stuffed animal.
Yeah. Yep, we are aware of it.
I remember a deputy dog was and I remember being very aroused and pretty much just playing with my deputy dog, and it was. I mean, and then there were neighborhood kids after that, and I mean, it was always like age equivalent people. Like, if I was at first grade, they were my friends that were first graders, or when I was in high school, they were my high school friends, or I went to college and they were the freshmen at and it was never like I was never forcing myself on people. What's interesting about guys is, at least in my experience, is they never said no. Nobody ever said don't do that I remember, and not stopping. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or I didn't. So I don't know. It just seemed, when I talk to people, and years ago I tried to calculate how many guys I'd probably been with in my life, and I probably been with 10 or 15 women. But maybe 2,004 guys, in my life. And I mean, this is, and I don't think I was being overly. I mean, it's just how it was. It's just, I don't know. It just seems strange. I hear people. They say, well, I've been with 10 people in my life, and I'm like, that's good. I mean, it's good to be close to people.
Right, and I think we all develop at different ages, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I know I developed at an early age, though that may have had to do with some medications, but it happens, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just how your biology works.
And channeling and understanding and communicating and parenting,
is a whole
teaching,
nother,
guiding. All of those are factors.
Right.
But I think I would just say, as sort of a general policy, advocates of sex addiction as a concept, as a diagnosis, only talk about it in terms of when it is actually causing a problem. It's not an addiction unless it's something that is causing distress on your life. Myself and many others believe that when you're looking at quote-unquote sex addiction or sexually dangerous behaviors, that the real problem is not in addiction. Certainly there are predilections, there are obsessions and interests in these different things, but it's not a addiction in the same way that, heroin
It's
might
more
be.
of a compulsion.
Yeah, it's certainly a desire, and perhaps poor impulse control, poor boundaries, poor teaching. All of these different things come into play. But I would certainly suggest that if you are kind of looking back on your life and you're wondering about yourself, that the level of a libido, the interest in other people, is not a problem. You know, if you have made mistakes or done anything inappropriate or anything that's caused trouble in your life, whether it was, you know, ethical or kind, or whether it was just having sex with somebody you probably shouldn't have, that's a totally separate issue.
Yeah.
Right, and I'm not saying that never happened. That's for sure. I mean, as a young
I don't
person,
know many people who haven't had sex that they didn't regret somewhat.
Right.
Yeah. That's
For
fairly,
sure.
pretty squarely in the common human experience.
Very much so.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have people I would like to, if I knew who or where they were, I would say, hey, boy, that wasn't right, was it?
Mm-hmm.
So, Mark, I hope we helped a little bit today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Any
was
final
good
thoughts?
because-
Any like kind of last questions or anything?
No, I
Okay.
appreciate that you have the show. I think it's a very good idea, and I like everyone that I've noticed on the show so far. It's a wonderful thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we
Oh,
definitely
I
appreciate that, and
love
appreciate you joining us on
everybody's hair, by the
Patreon.
way. Yeah, I love the hair. Everybody's hair looks great today.
Hey,
Oh,
thank
well,
you.
Thank
Have
you.
a-
I tried so
Have a
hard.
good day.
Yeah, have
You
a good
too.
one.
Thanks.
Well, that was definitely a thought-provoking call.
For sure.
Yeah. I know that I personally can remember far back having sexual thoughts and physical desires way earlier than I think most people experience puberty.
Certainly, I remember before I had the language, I had the education
Right.
to understand what masturbation was. I know I was doing it.
Yes.
And, you know, even then, I would have these sex dreams. And as a super conservative Christian, I always made sure to, like, marry my dream girl in my dream before having sex with her.
Oh, that's precious.
I don't know how weird that is. I don't know if that was a common experience for any other 8-year-olds or former 8-year-olds out in the audience right now. But yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody else so thoroughly internalized that idea of
just so
sex and marriage
adorable,
being
isn't it?
connected. I mean, that's very true.
So precious. Oh my gosh.
I had a very active imagination as a child.
I was the child that got in trouble for telling her fellow Girl Scouts about the sex machine that she had dreamed up.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So,
Were there diagrams, or was this just a thought?
Nope, there were diagrams.
All right.
I want to
Yeah.
see these.
We needed to get these
I
to an
mean,
engineer.
They are gone now, and it involved a Walmart. But you know, I can hear the
okay.
guys. I can hear the guys laughing at me right now.
So I think
where
the through line for
that
all
was
of this
the
is
store
that
of my people.
kids have weird sex thoughts.
Yes.
fact.
And that's just part of being a kid because they have
It
weird
is.
thoughts about everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I started like fantasizing about people at 9, and
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea what I was fantasizing about. I just had like random. I want that person to do touchy things.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know what touchy thing.
I think I was like 6, 7. So yeah.
Yeah.
With that, let's go on to, let me find my story here. I do have a story. This one is a little lighter than yours,
That's good. We could use that.
but I find it laughable. An Arizona GOP legislator introduces a bill to fund the border wall. Wait for it. With tax on internet porn.
I just love the like conservative bingo on that one. I mean, that
Yes.
gives you like half the board right there. It's just like this Rubes Goldberg machine
Is that
of how
like the
to just
freebie in the
offend
center, but it like
people.
expands out?
Right? Yeah.
Can we move this to the federal level? Because like I feel like we get a lot of opposition to the wall that way.
Yeah, if you start cutting back on people's porn, people start all of a sudden getting real involved in government.
Wait for
I
it.
don't like them
in
illegals,
the Bible
but-
Belt. Cut back and tax your porn in the Bible Belt and see what happens. But
Oh man, or only on like subversive porn, only on specifically like gay porn or interracial porn or anything that people in that area are going to thoroughly deny ever having watched and just watch that money come in.
Just find like the most searched porn terms per state and like tax that.
and not to get, too stereotypical, but we can all three see a picture of the woman who is sponsoring this bill. And Christy, what did you say? She looks like
She's got a look on her face like she's convinced that the only reason her husband won't have sex with her is because of internet porn.
Yeah.
Like there's just a crankiness.
And
to
she's
it.
definitely
but nevertheless,
she's definitely in her 60s, and she's got the whole bob going. So it's just a whole image. And I feel really sorry for this woman.
Yeah,
because
just this idea that
funding the border wall with internet porn taxation is just...
At least she's creative.
yeah, I mean,
guess
there's
there's
this part of
that.
me that it wants to like legalize and normalize and I guess
Right,
tax and these different things, but yeah,
Bring it
this is
into the
just
mainstream.
it's just a bizarre way of going about it.
It really, really is. And it's just... Oh, I feel so sorry for her. Anyway.
Don't you remember George Bush? Read my lips, know your taxes on my
Yeah.
porn. I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
Yeah,
They cut off the mic.
That's what he
That's
was
like
concerned
exactly
about.
what he said?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Al Gore had just invented the internet, and
Right,
he was,
so-
being a forward thinker.
All right. So with that, we actually, anyone who would like to call in, please, 512-686-0279. We would love to hear from you. Any questions, thoughts, comments, suggestions, or anything really. With that, we will go to Jason in Florida. Jason, you are on the air.
Hello.
Hi, how are you tonight?
Hi, my name is Jason, and I'm
Well, yeah, whoops.
Oh, okay.
Well, that
All
sounded
right.
a little odd.
Yeah, Jason, we'd love to hear from you again if you'd like to give us a call. But would you like to talk to Stephen?
I think I would, actually. Stephen in Florida, you are on the air.
Oh, wow. Okay. This is so awesome.
Hi.
Hi, I'm going to try to look away from the TV so I don't see the delay. It'll confuse me.
That's
enough.
probably
It
a
is.
good idea, yeah.
So, I just wanted to ask about our fellow atheists within the community that say that they came to atheism through logic and reason. However, they don't apply that logic and reason to things like sexual orientation.
Yeah.
For for example, it annoys me when my fellow atheists will produce statistics saying that trans people are more likely to commit suicide and stuff like that. However, they always forget that due to the oppression in society, that's going to make you more suicidal.
Right.
Right.
If
Yeah,
you
looking
have-
at the cause of that. Yeah, absolutely. I
Right.
mean, you see that when you look at other marginalized communities and with the advent of gay rights. I mean, I don't want to stress it as if like,
The advent?
ta-da, we have gay rights now, because we are increasingly protecting gay folks and giving them access to these different institutions. And as we do that, we see their suicide rate drop dramatically.
Yeah, and you see the same thing with trans children who are respected. You see that their suicide rates are
And
much
accepted.
lower. Yeah.
Exactly. I was debating someone earlier, and I was like, well, don't you think, like, as a whole, like, there would be less suicide if people are treated with respect?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
first? I mean, it just doesn't make
crazy to put those ideas together.
Well, and I think the argument against any kind of LGBTQIA rights versus, well, these statistics show that trans people tend to have a higher mortality rate, wouldn't necessarily be the same. But I think I see where you're going with this. The question between, are you asking our thoughts on the anti-LGBTQIA people in the movement, or are you asking our thoughts on the statistics relating to the oppression and the suicide and the mortality rate?
Okay. Well, basically, I'm asking, like, how do you think we can, I guess, help our fellow atheists and people who are still believers, like, overcome those, I guess, like, I don't know. I just still consider like logically consistent to I don't know. I just don't know how to explain. I just think any argument against like LGBTQIA, etc. Like they're mostly illogical. They think that we're basing things on simply emotion.
Mm-hmm.
However, we can't just live our lives. In fact, there's the human component to everything as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a story you hear a lot of folks who came out in like the 80s and 90s and how the response from parents and people like that was this sort of like, oh no, it's not that I don't accept you for being gay, but now I'm afraid for you. I'm afraid that you're not ever going to have a family. That was a big thing that gay men in the 80s and 90s were hearing, was that by being gay, you could never have a family.
Mm-hmm.
And as we have like increased access to rights, we've started seeing plenty of gay folks getting married, and we've seen them, adopting kids and having kids of their own, raising kids and having...
Or in trans relationships, like naturally having children.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as we extend these opportunities, we have seen a greater sense of well-being. And so the idea that because trans folks commit suicide at a much higher rate, a much, much higher rate than the rest of the population, that somehow implies that there's something wrong with being trans instead of that there's something wrong with society. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a totally backwards argument, and you're right. And I guess the question of what do we do about that is
acceptance.
Shows like this.
Yeah.
It's giving people a chance to actually meet and speak with or hear from trans voices, queer voices, people of all different stripes. I sincerely believe, especially living down here in the South, that exposure to these different types of people and hearing their voices is critical in having any sort of empathy and understanding that goes beyond "you gross."
I mean, I know I personally never, even from a young child, I never understood the idea of "ooh, gross." When it was explained to me, even as a negative thing, I was like, well, okay, what's wrong with that? But then exposure just reinforces that idea of, no, we're all just people. Mm-hmm. And we're all just people making our way through the world in whatever way, shape, or form feels and is right for us. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of all I have to say about that.
We all think that our opinions come from logic and reasoning, and sometimes they do, but often they don't, and we just sort of follow up with our own internal mental arguments afterwards. And so when you talk to someone and they're using sort of really large-scale statistics, for instance, like what you mentioned, to tackle a much finer-grained problem, that's kind of a clue for me that you're talking to someone who has a preformed opinion and is looking for something statistical or scientific or logical to argue it, rather than someone who has come to that opinion through logic and reasoning.
An inductive versus deductive kind of perspective. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that before, just the importance of asking questions and using the Socratic method and epistemology, and, just how do you know? Mm-hmm. And, what does this actually mean?
And explain, your position. Explain it to me in a way that I will understand it.
Yeah, at that point, I would abandon trying to debate that person and move into a different form of inquiry, and just try to what if, or why do you think that, or how about this, or and that sort of thing, instead of making it an argument, making it a discussion, and also just more exposure is good.
Yes, of course. And I was wondering, do you have time for just one more thing, if that's possible?
Yes.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering. I've been with my boyfriend for almost 9 years now.
Congrats.
And thank you. And the thing is, I'm atheist. I was never really raised in any religion, but he's a Catholic. Mm-hmm. He's
practicing?
Was raised. Yes, well, I guess I would say practicing. He used to go to church a lot more often.
Uh-huh.
But I guess but he is like a devout believer basically, and he grew up also in Vietnam in the country. So just of course it was mostly just like being raised in a very conservative environment,
Very repressed. Yeah.
and the thing is, like, he's still in the closet to his family. And I mean, it's okay to say on the show they're never going to see this. But
Not a large Catholic audience for this show, no.
Yeah, but there's, I don't have any problems in my relationship, thankfully. But what I noticed with him is, I noticed with a lot of other religious people, if something is introduced to him that would conflict with his, religious beliefs, like him specifically, he will say, yeah, I know that's right, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to believe it.
Just having to alienate it, having to keep it away from your mind and
Cognitive
avoid
dissonance, I believe, is what it's called.
Yeah. Yes. And I just think that, I don't know, if there was less of that, the world would be better.
The world would be better. And, I don't know that there's a whole lot of value, like Sarah said, in trying to fight that so much as there is in sort of constantly exposing somebody to a new and better idea. Because when they have that kind of dissonance, that's just going to be a grain of sand in the pearl or in the oyster. That's going to be a rock in their shoe until they eventually learn how to get over it.
And I'll say personally, from personal experience, I go to see a therapist every 2 weeks, and I would suggest that for most people. Therapy is a wonderful thing. And one of the things that she stresses to me often is that you cannot change those around you. You can only change yourself. But occasionally, by changing yourself, others may change to fit your new self.
Yeah, it's okay. I've accepted the fact that he's not going to change, so that's fine.
Give it some time. You never know.
Way, just in a way, because it doesn't really affect us.
Yeah, if y'all are able to continue living your life, it's not like you need to save him from hell, because hell doesn't exist. So, it's definitely a drag if that ever causes tension in the relationship, but otherwise, the goal is just to enjoy yourself and have the best, funnest, most enjoyable, well-being and happy life that you can until you can't anymore. So, yeah, it sounds like you're doing it.
Yeah, we definitely are.
Awesome. Well, glad to hear it.
You guys have a great night.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was definitely, heavy but light at the same time.
It's always nice to just hear that people are enjoying life.
Yes.
We do this show for a reason. We do this show, this network exists, this building exists, because we're concerned about the way religion affects not only us, but everybody in our society. We're concerned that religion is infiltrating our government and leading to, for instance, trans folks being discriminated against at their jobs, being able to be in the military, these different things.
The suggestion of financing a giant border wall with taxes on internet pornography.
Yeah, because porn should somehow be stopped and gotten rid of. And, so we do this show and we have these arguments and we do these things because these things matter, because these ideas are important and it's important to change them.
The people are important.
Yeah, absolutely. But, if people are able to live their life and continue on happily down the road, we don't want to be so militaristic as to miss that.
Right. And I think we do a pretty good job of balancing that. I was recently told by someone who I will not say how they're related to me, that they did not necessarily agree with our message, but that they did appreciate that we were non-confrontational.
Well, and like you said, that's how you change a mind.
It is.
It's not
just
by fighting.
Exposure. Like you said, exposure.
Yeah, and there are great shows on the network that, really explicate some of these ideas through debate, and that's beautiful too. But In any case,
Are we
these
speaking
things
of
matter.
ASP?
Well, yeah, in large part, yeah.
We're a kinder, gentler show.
Right,
Yes.
a little bit.
More,
Right
more
back to the George Bush thing there.
kind of
Okay, call back.
quiet, not quieter, but just softer and gentler and smoother. And wait, go for your
Sexy.
smooth voice. Smooth. I can't do it. Gives me chills. So, with that, did you guys want to take another call?
Absolutely. We've got a few good ones on the line and just a few more lines open.
We do. 512-686-0279. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, or offers.
I mean,
As previously mentioned, apparently I am quite the hoe, and I am happy about that.
Yeah, and we will be available to meet live on Valentine's
Yes,
Day.
we will.
So,
That's true.
yeah, go ahead and get those Valentine cards together. If you've been harboring a secret crush, feel free to.
Why are you pointing at me?
I don't know.
I will say.
I do accept all applicants.
I will say I have to approach the ACA president about my wardrobe budget.
oh my.
That's more of a joke than it is the truth. Remy, you are on the air.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We are doing well, thank you. What do you want to talk to us about today?
So, something that I've been struggling with recently is that I have a very active sex life with myself, but I've been struggling to find other people to like have sex with, and it's been quite a struggle.
Yeah.
In there.
Yeah. And it's just been hard. And I just was maybe looking for some suggestions, because like, I mean, I have friends in my life, and like, they're really great friends, but like, it's been hard for me with some people to like kind of be brave and like take that step to be like, so, this is what I'm wondering, but like,
Are you interested in a nightcap?
and then a little something after that.
yeah.
Right. So I think the first question for us would be, and this doesn't, it's not to say that it will necessarily change our answers, but just to know where we are, because this is secular sexuality. What is your, how do you identify and what is your orientation?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a trans person. I guess fall under genderqueer, non-binary. I don't know. When people ask me my gender, I'm just like, eh.
TBD. It's fine.
Yeah.
You're in the question mark stage.
Yeah. No, I feel kind of settled in it though. Like,
yeah,
cool.
Just kind of.
You can settle
my
in the
own
question
thing,
mark.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends on the day.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like that with sexuality, right? Like, I have different people that I'm attracted to. Like, I'm attracted to, like, femininity in general. Like, and that doesn't matter, like, what the person identifies as. Like, I like femininity.
Yeah.
But, like, I mean, I also like masculinity sometimes, too. But, like, so it's kind of, it's been hard to kind of, I mean, I think the thing that I'm also struggling with is, like, being a trans person, and finding people that I feel like, I don't know, that are interested in me in general. And like, there are people that are interested in being friends with me and like,
right.
Like, yeah. And like, I kind of come off as like that gay friend for like people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is fine, but like,
I have a few, yeah.
Yeah, like there comes a point with some people where I'm like, but I'm actually like also wondering about like this other thing. I don't know how to bring that up because, because I feel like sometimes I get pigeonholed into being like just a friend.
Right.
To a lot of like people. And it's just hard to kind of like, I don't know. I mean, I think some of
To
it's
be
probably my own
seen as a sexual being.
Right, rather than just
Yeah.
the friend on the side. Yeah.
Totally. And like taking that risk is like, it feels
Terrifying.
like a risk. Like it's,
Big jump.
For sure. Especially because you value those friendships and you don't want to lose them.
And that's an unfortunate thing. I'd like to believe we live in a world where you could say, hey, I'm really enjoying being your friend. Would you want to fool around sometime? And somebody could say, no, thank you. And then things would just go
back
on the
to
way
the-
that they
Right.
were.
Yeah. Keep on like Donkey Kong or whatever.
Yeah. Unfortunately, people often have, these concerns. And we've created this culture where if somebody expresses interest, that somehow creates an obligation,
Right.
And so people start to feel pressured, and that's not the way it should be, and that's not the way it has to be. But we've just been doing it that way for so long that it's
That's the
kind
way
of the
our
assumption
culture has been structured.
in a lot of ways.
Right.
So, I would still encourage that type of openness, that type of upfrontness that says, hey, this has been a really good time. How are you feeling? Are you wanting to come back to my place? And would you be interested? And, I do think that is still an okay and appropriate question if you feel comfortable asking it and if you feel like you can ask somebody without there being any coercion to it.
Well, and not only that, as speaking from someone who, for majority of her life so far, identified as a straight woman, to kind of hint up front that you are not necessarily straight or gay, that you are open to, I'm guessing based on your answers, kind of a mix of maybe pansexual.
Yeah.
So not closing the door on that immediately, because I have met plenty of people who are very upfront with their intentions of not being a sexual partner. And that has its place. But there's also the place for hinting that there could be something else there.
Yeah.
Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are tacky ways to do it. If
sure, there's tacky
hey,
ways.
did you check out the ass on that one? Is maybe
And I
not
would
the best
go,
way.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe not the best way of letting people know that you're attracted to the type of person who just walked by. But letting. I
Ooh,
think
those
it's-
lips, don't you want to just kiss them?
I think there's a respectful way to watch a movie and say, oh my goodness, that Scarlett Johansson / Robert Downey Jr. scene.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with
They
that
both work
character.
great for me, like that is a possible thing to say and to communicate in a way that is respectful and kind and not objectifying.
Yeah, it's tough to.
Yeah, I think that's
breach
more
it,
what I'm
though.
looking for is like how to kind of reach that subject in like an appropriate way that's, yeah.
Yeah, it can be tough, can it? And I think one of the big things is that if you're starting in a, oh gosh, I've lost the word. A scene.
Synonyms would be.
Yeah, I know, right? If you're in a situation that is already established as a friend, sort of non-sexual thing, that specifically, the context, that's the word, context.
Okay.
So in a non-sexual context, it's difficult to jump to a sexual thing, to an offer or a request or a, giving of information. So one thing that can be done is to set up a more sexual context, or just hey, do you? I need to
Make
go
a sly
to
comment.
the sex toy store. Do you want to come with me? And then you're looking at all the different things, or
Check out the porn and go, ooh, this looks interesting.
right. And then you're just in a inherently different context, which makes it sort of more okay. I mean,
More
obviously
organic.
it's still awkward, but there's a little. The jump is shorter.
Yes.
So taking that
it's not
platonic friend
as-
to a wine bar instead of a movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
creating a little romance, and then still putting it out there as a question that doesn't come with an obligation attached to it.
Right.
But yeah, what you're saying is just try to make it a shorter leap by not being like a Chuck E. Cheese when you make
women. You're
overture.
Yeah, and there's always, of course, finding other people who you don't know already, and like going to a bar or whatever the kids do these days.
However people meet.
I don't know. Is it the Tinders or the Googles?
I love the way you touch your wine glass. It
Oh my.
makes me all tickly inside.
Something about that freaked me out. I don't mean to be judgy about anybody's kink, but I got chills.
I mean,
That's okay. I got chills on myself.
I mean, that's an interesting thing that you bring up, though, like, because, like, online, I don't really have that many problems finding people to, like, mess around with. Like, that's not an issue. And so, like, that's a fun part of my life. But, like, I'm getting to the point where I'm like, I really want the real thing.
Right.
And you can find that online, but another way to broach the topic might be to show your friend your Tinder date and just sort of express like, this is somebody that I'm attracted to, and letting them know that you are interested in.
That's a really good idea. Like asking them for their opinion on your Tinder dates.
Yeah, because people make so many assumptions based on the way we look about the type of person that we would be looking at.
Very true.
Dispelling those rumors in these various ways, I think, is an important way to express an interest.
You would be surprised.
And a lot of it depends on where you're at, of course, how to meet and greet people. If you're in a big city area, then it's a lot easier in some ways.
A lot more options.
Well, yeah. All right.
I hope that helps.
But yeah, dry spells happen, and it's all right. The last piece of advice I would give you on the way out the door is just to
There's
remember.
nothing wrong with masturbating more than 5 times a day.
Yeah, absolutely that. Absolutely that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're not going to go blind.
But
your palms won't grow hair. Yeah. But then the other thing is just to keep a sense of balance about it, to remember that you can want these things. You can want a sexual romantic relationship, and that's great. Want something and then go get it. But keep an eye on yourself. If you start to feel like you're needing something, that you have to have it, that you'll die without it, those sorts of things can actually make it a lot harder to get what we want, and can create a lot of barriers in the way that we talk to people, the way we see people, the way we feel about ourselves. So, if you find yourself getting to that place of like wanting something so bad it hurts and that it's keeping you up at night, that's a good time to really take a step back and figure out what need are you trying to meet. And maybe that's a time to talk to a therapist or somebody else about those feelings.
And remember that there is a difference between romance and sex. And sometimes they go together, but they don't have to.
True fact.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Good luck with the dry spell. We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
That was great.
It was. I have to say, I feel for Remy because I've been there. And the attraction to someone who you are afraid to lose, right? For fear of intimidating or scaring off. It's a real fear.
Yeah.
It is
It's
legitimate, and it's often valid. It often can be. I'm about to celebrate a 1-year anniversary with somebody that I knew as a friend and was really hesitant to break that. And we both went out as friends to get a drink, kind of both thinking we knew what the other person was thinking, but everybody's careful about being the first person to say that.
Very hesitant.
Yeah, and so I saw all of that hesitance playing out, and about an hour into the thing, I just kissed her. And that was kind of what sealed the deal. I don't know if either of us would have made a move otherwise.
She didn't back off. She went for it.
She didn't back off. She went for it. And, here we are now. So, there is something to be said about a little bit of boldness when it's not creating an obligation for somebody else.
But then again,
But it's not
if
also
it's
not
not
easy.
reciprocal, back off.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, did she say back the fuck off?
I did not, but now I'm going to say
Sorry,
back the fuck off.
So, Christy, I did hear that you had actually a story about the Texas Archdiocese that you might want to get into.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to talk about that before we wrap up. Did you want to take one more call before we take things home?
I think we can take one more call.
All right.
Joe from Missouri, you are on the air.
Yes.
Hello. What would you like to talk to us about tonight?
Oh, I actually just, I was curious if I can get a clarification on the extra letters from the LG. Let's see, how did it...
Everything from LG on?
LGBTQIA?
Yeah. Actually, first, if I could ask, before that, could you remind me what state introduced that porn thing?
That was...
Out of Arizona.
Arizona.
Oh, my gosh. That is so silly.
Yeah.
But on to the actual subject.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was curious about the LG...
There are so many different versions of the acronym.
Letters.
Yeah, and it changes depending on who you look at and which website you're on.
Usually you say LGBTQ, but there...
No, what would the Q stand for?
IA. Oh,
it
queer.
depends on who you're asking,
that's
but
true.
it could be queer or questioning.
Mm-hmm.
So in that spot, we're generally referring to gender queer, but there's a reason that I, as a therapist, and not everybody in my field does this or feels comfortable doing this, but I tend to prefer to just use the term queer or queer community or queer folks rather than LGBTQIA++.
It's very encompassing.
Now,
It feels more human to me.
Yes.
I do understand that word queer is or has been used as a slur.
Yeah,
And
some people will not react.
A lot of people feel very uncomfortable with that, and I do mean to be respectful to those folks. And I, as somebody myself who has had that hurled at them, I definitely understand how that can be triggering. So it is tricky to have these conversations in respectful ways.
Oh, yeah. Now, to the next letter. I guess what brought this question on was I earlier in the program I had heard an extra letter that I hadn't heard, and I think it's I or something.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
IA.
Yeah, you often
Can you help me with
IA.
that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's generally standing for intersex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, help me with that. I don't know what that means.
An intersex individual is born with physical characteristics that are related to that are traditionally related to both genders. So some characteristics, and it doesn't necessarily mean
classically may have been referred to as a hermaphrodite, but is not really referred that way anymore.
Yeah, nobody says that.
Yeah.
And plus that conjures very specific images, and it could be all sorts of things. Different genital configurations of various sorts.
Genetics are complex, I think,
true.
is the short version of the story, and it's something that is so often missed by this false dichotomy of male female, and when we talk about bathroom bills and bullshit legislation, we're really missing the point and the reality of that complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very much. Yeah, I agree. Now, I understand one of you have been trained in psychology.
Yes, I'm a LPC intern.
That's great. Now, I don't know if you've ever had any experience in the question I'm about to ask, but how do the intersex usually? How would you think that? How do they usually, I guess, quote end quote, turn out? Would they be
lifestyle outcomes? And you mean in terms of successful marriages and income and jobs and things like that?
More like, or do you think they? I hate using the word they because we're all human. But
them they.
Yeah, sure. now, I mean, do you think, or do they generally lean towards a certain sex?
Yeah, it depends on, when we're using the term intersex, we're talking about a wide variety of possible permutations and expressions of different types of genes. Yeah, so it is really hard to say, and sometimes there may be a medical intervention necessary for reproduction or other concerns for perhaps cosmetic and desire and all of these different things. So there's not a simple answer to that question. I can say that very generally.
Can they reproduce?
Some of them.
Generally speaking.
Very, very often, yes. Like anybody else, when there are complications in your gene and sex expression, things can get tricky. You know, but again, we're talking about a very broad topic, a very broad number of people. So to really answer that question, we would have to look at statistic outcomes for like super specific hormonal and genetic disorders.
Because when you're talking 7 billion people, or billion people,
yeah, 7 billion people on the planet.
Exactly.
Statistically, it's a sizable margin.
So, yeah, there's just a lot of different types of folks. And to kind of wrap it up, that next letter, A, generally is standing for ace or asexual. Folks that do not have strong romantic, I mean, aromantic and asexual are different things. But as we're trying to simplify everything down into one acronym that's increasingly expanding, we're generally talking about folks who are not interested in sexual or romantic relationships. And then the plus is really to capture everybody else
and the rest.
Yeah, so it's very tricky, and that's one of the reasons for defaulting to a more generalized term. But we also say things like the LGBTQ community, so that we are capturing everybody. And it's tricky. The politics of it, we won't get into like the long history, but for the longest time, gay men were very hesitant to really open up or allow access to the gay community to lesbian women.
Right.
And then folks who were bisexual were sort of ostracized by both. And trans folks were treated very poorly as that community expanded. So this acronym has existed historically to bring people together. And it's
the more
increasingly
letters, the better.
doing that. Yeah.
The more, it's basically the more letters, the better, the more inclusive it is.
But it does get,
But that's what the plus is
But
for.
it does get tricky from a sheer logistic perspective.
Right, yeah. I was having trouble enunciating all the letters.
Alphabet soup.
Yes. But I hope, did that help at all with your questions today?
That was actually a great convo. So, I appreciate you all's time. I think you and all of the other programs on the Atheist Experience area, I think you all are doing very well for yourselves.
Hey, well, we
Thank you
appreciate
very
that.
much.
Glad to help.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a
Take
good
care.
evening.
Thank you. You too.
Well, I think that was a very important conversation that I think we should have often. Of what exactly, is the LGBTQIA plus community. And I do apologize for missing the plus at the end every time I said that before. But it really is a plus everything.
And some people throw in a second Q. I mean, there's not a standardized term that's used broadly everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why most people say LGBTQ.
Yeah,
Or LGBT.
Really, the point is just providing access and opportunity to marginalized folks of all stripes.
Representation, being seen, these things are important.
Absolutely.
And before, I think to his point, we had talked before about TERFs, which, yes,
we have.
trans exclusionary radical feminists.
Anything heavier to put in this? Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
Something brown and strong.
I'm all out. But just that we had mentioned on a previous show about TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists, and that the idea of one group trying to claw their way past another group, minority groups clawing their way for the top, and how that doesn't get anyone to the top.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that again because that issue of minorities each trying to claw their way to the top and then stomping on those around or below them to try and get up higher on that rung of the ladder just makes me sad. I mean, it makes me upset and it makes me angry at times, but most of all, it just makes me sad because we're all in various types of minorities, and there's no point in shitting on everyone else just to try and get one leg up. We should all, what is it? A rising tide floats all boats, or
Raises all boats.
Raises all boats.
Yeah, and, we see this in all kinds of different ways. I think that as an organization, they've done a good job of responding to it, but the Women's March has been criticized by a lot of people for not being inclusive, for not being considerate of minority women and trans women and these different things. And the way that we respond to that criticism, the way that people make that space is incredibly important.
Were you at the Women's March?
No.
You should have come, and I would have been holding your hand the entire fucking time. Because that's just the way that we do this shit.
Yeah.
With that, Christy, did you want to tell us about the Texas Archdiocese?
Yeah, this is a really important news story that's been kind of slow developing over the last several months. And we're going to be doing a deep dive next week with some folks from SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. But, after the Pennsylvania grand jury report came out in October, the Archdiocese of Texas announced that they were going to do a report that will be released no later than next Thursday. I think we thought it would be out by now, but still dragging their feet. But they have, and this is not done by the Attorney General. This is the Archdiocese themselves saying that they are going to get, or they have gotten a team of outside former FBI and other investigators to come in and look at any priests that have credible accusations against them. And so really the questions that we're looking at is whether or not this is enough, whether or not this is a step in the right direction. I mean, whether this report will go far enough to actually protect children. And then I think kind of what our role as skeptics and atheists is in, protecting kids. We'd like to be able to say, well, fucking the children or the Christians should take care of themselves. But when you have children being abused, that answer doesn't work.
Yeah, to that I'd say fuck that, because if you hold yourself internally accountable, you're never going to be truly accountable.
And, this feels like a good step, that they're acknowledging that this, the Pennsylvania Attorney General report said that, over 1,000 children, over 100 priests identified, covering 70 years worth of abuse in that state, and wanting to go, oh, shit, we might be having some of that here.
Whoops.
Might. Yeah, the Spotlight report came out of Boston in 2002, and we're now doing this. It doesn't feel to me like progress. It doesn't feel like, we're making the steps that we should be.
I honestly think, though, that there should be a line, a distinction drawn between as we say, the court of public opinion and that of the actual Catholic Church. Because, of course, the Catholic Church serves itself.
Sure.
And to protect itself. But I think the court of public opinion, such as it is, knows that this is everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not as if, we had a couple of stories out of Boston and then one big story out of Pennsylvania.
Right.
I mean, worldwide, we have seen just constant uncovering of
And
these
if you have
sorts of
not
scandals.
seen the movie Spotlight, you need to see the movie Spotlight.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it's a harrowing
chronicles
film, but yeah.
how the story came out.
How this sort of initially broke. And yeah, we've talked about it on this show before, but to me the most heartbreaking thing is as the credits roll, they show a listing of all of the major cities that have had significant abuse scandals become uncovered in the time since then. And man, that list just goes on and on and on.
Honestly, the most heartbreaking thing of the entire movie for me is before and, if I'm not mistaken, before and after the list of cities, they display the hotline for if you have been abused by someone in the clergy, to call that line. And there are still people to this day calling that hotline. And to me, that is the most heartbreaking part, is that there are still children to this day being abused by those authority figures who they trust and love.
And that have special powers over them. I mean, this isn't just a principal, which is an authority figure in your life. This isn't just a doctor or a policeman or somebody that you're supposed to respect. This is somebody who, in your mind, has control over your immortal soul. Yeah, that level of power and magical thinking that somebody could have over your life, especially as a child. It's devastating, and so we will be getting into the details of that report as they come out next week.
And that should be a super fun episode. But though it will not be a super fun episode, it will be a very important and enlightening episode.
Yeah.
And as harrowing as it will be, I look forward to it.
Absolutely. And I would say to anybody watching now that has had these types of experiences that might want to feel like they might want their voice to be heard, but is nervous about the idea of calling in.
Anonymous.
Please feel free to make an anonymous call or to send us an email over this next week. We would love to hear your stories. If you don't want us to share them on air, we won't. If you don't want us to share your name or any details on air, then we won't. But, our email is right there, sex at atheist-community.org. We would love to hear from you and to be able to share your stories.
And to wrap it up, just please hit that like and subscribe button. I see that we have maybe half the number of likes that we have of viewers right now, so it'd be great to get those likes and subscribes up, please. It helps us get out to a wider audience and helps us reach more people who may need just an ear or, to see this, to realize that they are not alone. With that, I think we are going to wrap it a little, maybe like 5 minutes early. Christy, as we do on a weekly basis, or wait, Sarah.
What?
Do you remember the outro that we usually use?
I think I do.
Do you guys want to try it together?
Yes.
Okay, let's all three try it. All right. Whether it's with, we can say random shit. Whether it's with
a Tinder date or a friend.
Yes, or pasties or naked as fuck.
Or in front of the Supreme Court.
Ooh.
No matter what letters in the alphabet ascribe your labels or how you identify, yeah.
Or whether you're wearing a military uniform.
Yes.
Whether you're in Arizona or love porn.
Or in Arkansas or anywhere in the Bible Belt. We just want to say,
Go out and give yourself
a big old orgasm. Or better yet,
give somebody else one.
Give someone else an orgasm. Yes, that.